And Paul says a Christian does the same thing with our character. He says this is what we're putting on: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. But notice something about all five is every single one of them requires another person. Think about this. You can't be patient alone. You're just bored. You can't be kind alone. You cannot practice gentleness in an empty room. This wardrobe that God gives us only works in a crowd of people. But hey, as we start today, I want to tell you a little bit about my hobbies. This last Wednesday, I played pickleball with the bros, all right? Kids asleep, put them in bed, and we played pickleball. And first 4 games started great because I won them all. That's usually how it goes, mostly. But then the last 2 games, I was on Pastor Josh's team, and I was like, let's just do work, and this should be an easy 2 games. And we lost those 2 games, which was 90% Josh's fault. The other 10%, yes, I do blame my teammates. That's if you're wondering if that's the case. But here was the real reason actually we lost, is it started to rain. And as it started to rain, it started to pour a little bit. And as the court got wet, I looked down at my New Balance shoes I was wearing that time that had big old holes in the bottom of it so I could feel my socks getting wet. I came to this point where if I tried to lift my foot, it was sticking like a sponge. And if I started to plant my foot, I would slide. And I was like, I don't think my ACL is worth this win. But as we're looking at the elements and trying to play the game around us, all of a sudden we noticed a little tiny monsoon was rolling in. And we're in the middle of monsoon season, which is so fun because if you wash your car the next day, it is full of dust and dirt. When the big winds come through and you get a little rain for about 2 minutes and then it goes away, the fun thing you get to do in the next morning on your way to work or on the way to the golf course or as you run your errands is somewhere between you and the 303, there are just tree splits, turned over, down around. And it's nothing like when you see a tree on the ground and its roots are straight up in the air. And it seems like the opposite of what we've been describing here with being rooted and ready for what life has for us. But any arborist, that's a fancy word for a plant expert, will tell you the reason those trees blow down, those beautiful Palo Verdes that look so green and nice and give you allergies during certain times of the years, but the reason they blow over is because they look great on the outside. They look great above the surface. They are nice and great and lush, but they have these shallow roots that don't go down deep into the ground so that when the wind blows, they just push them over. But some of you are from places that have real trees. Some of you are from California. We won't hold that against you, all right? But up north, you have these trees called the redwood trees, literally the tallest living thing in the world. Those trees can get as high as 300 feet high. That's a football field above the surface. And you wonder why. You're like, well, a redwood, if it is 300 feet above, their roots must go down 300 feet, but they don't. Funny enough, they actually go down about 10 feet, which relatively is not very much. But do you know how a redwood doesn't fall over like a Palo Verde? Is they don't just go deep, but they go wide. And as they go wide, they find another redwood roots, and they start linking their roots and casting themselves around each other. So when the wind blows and the storm comes, it is not pushing against one lonely Palo Verde tree, one lonely redwood tree, but is pushing against the whole forest. You see, the funny thing is that a redwood tree cannot stand alone. And church, neither can you. Today, as we continue our series, kind of looking through the book of Colossians, and we're going to be in Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 today, we're going to see how we can't do this whole life thing alone. How we need a community around us, how we need a gospel presence that loves us. And last week, as we started this kind of rooted and ready path that we are taking, we said we must be first rooted in our worship. We must know who the God is that we serve. And we said that here at Cross Church, this is how we practice this, is when you come to a service here, you're going to be rooted in worship, meaning we're going to pray through, we're going to praise through, we're going to preach through so that we can practice the Word of God. And this is what it looks like to be rooted in our worship. Well, today we continue and we're going to see what does it look like to be rooted in community, to have a community that is around us, that we can link our roots and our trees together so that when life comes and pushes against us, we will not fall over, but we will stand firm. And what I love is this continues to build on itself, because over the next couple weeks, we're going to see how we'll be rooted in discipleship and how that makes us ready for the mission and the leadership that God calls us to be. But today, as we land here in Colossians chapter 3, we ask this question of how can we indeed then be rooted in community? And ask this question a little bit more is how can we have a Christ-centered community? How can we link our roots with something that has shared values, something that gives us life and does not take away, something that reinforces how to live counter to the world around us? And I love how Paul gives us this roadmap in Colossians chapter 3, starting in verse 12. And here's the very first point that we're going to see that comes right out of this, is having this community that God has put, is first we must put on the radical values that God has given us. Put on the radical values. Check this out. In verse 12, it says this: therefore, as God's chosen one, holy and dearly loved, put on compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. Here as we start this passage, and as you maybe heard those words, you're like, can you stop saying these words that are really hard for me to live out? So that's how I felt as I was reading this passage. But before we touch this list of these things that, if we're honest, maybe don't always characterize the way we portray our life in the character traits we sometimes wish we had all the time. But before we get into there, we need to first look at the order of this verse, because it's so important. The order of this verse is the gospel. Paul does not say, put on these 5 things so that God will love you, so that God will choose you, so that God will bring you into his family. Instead, he says, you are already chosen. You're already holy. You're already dear loved. These 3 titles are given to us before a single command. You see, this whole church thing is not about earning our way to God. It is that God loves us so much that he sent his son to die on a cross for us, to be raised again so that we can experience love and come to him. And then our lives can start to change. And Paul, as he starts this, he's saying, hey, I know you don't have it all together, but I still love you. I have chosen you. I have pursued you. I have given you an opportunity to come to me. And here's how this whole Jesus thing works, is we don't get dressed to get into the family, is we get dressed because we are in the family. Then there's this verb that comes with it, is he says, put on. The Greek word here is enduo, and is literally the word for getting dressed. Now, I want to do a little quick poll here, is how many of you pick out your outfit the night before, all right? Dang, really? How do you guys operate in the morning? I got my outfit laid out the night before because I don't have time in the morning, and it's like my closet, I'm using my phone light so I don't wake up my wife or something in the next room. All right, so I'm a night before. Hopefully you're participating in this. How many pick out your outfits the morning of? All right, that's crazy. How many outfits do you pick out the morning of? That's my next question, all right? 1, okay. Anyone like 5? You try some things on and, hey, she didn't look. I'm not, all right? She wasn't looking when you did that. But here's the deal, is every night or morning, you stand in front of a closet and you look at your clothes and probably wonder, like, why do I have these clothes? I need to buy new clothes, right? But you're going to decide what you're going to wear. And Paul says a Christian does the same thing with our character. And now count the list he puts here. As he says, this is what we're putting on: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, all the things describing the way we do not drive here in Phoenix, Arizona. But notice something about all 5, is every single one of them requires another person. Think about this. You can't be patient alone. You're just bored. You can't be kind alone. You cannot practice gentleness in an empty room. This wardrobe that God gives us only works in a crowd of people. And look at the first two pieces of it. He says compassion. This is a heart that actually feels it when someone else is hurting. The word here is for anoko. It is the word Jesus used for Jesus when he looked at the crowds and he had compassion on them. And this is exactly how God has treated us. But then we also see kindness. Kindness is the compassion with work boots on. It does something. It sees how people are hurting and then it tries to do something about it. And I love it. It does it for people who did not earn it. But you look at these values and you might wonder, well, why do we say put on radical values? Why are these radical? Well, here's why. Because this was written in a first century Roman culture. And the word humility was not a good word. Humility was not a virtue. Humility was actually used to describe, it was an insult to describe low and servile and servants and slaves. When you were called humble in the Roman world, it meant you were a doormat. Nobody who the original audience in Colossae who would read this would see this as a good thing they would put on their resume. But Paul takes that word that Rome used for a slave and he pins it on the family of the king of the universe like it's a medal. And you think about what we are to put on. What we put on tells us what we are preparing for. You can tell what somebody is ready for by what they put on. Nobody wears 60 pounds of fire gear to stare at a fire. Firefighters wear that so they are prepared to go into a fire. A police officer wears that uniform so they are ready for whatever they encounter. I wear Booker shoes and not boots because I'm going to bring you to the book and talk about sons, right? And you like that? Ah, yeah. Woo. That was fresh. Didn't even write that in my notes. I'm going to try to duplicate it for second service and it's not going to go well, all right? Also, don't tell them, but they don't laugh at any of my jokes the way you guys do here at first service. And that's the one we live stream. So people don't think I'm funny before they come to our church, all right? Or when they go to second service. Anyway, what were we talking about? Okay. But this is exactly, he shows us what we are putting on. We are putting on these radical values that changes the way we approach our world. But here's what I love, because Paul continues to build on this. And this leads beautifully to this second point, is we not only put on these radical values, but we also forgive radical wrongdoings. Forgive radical wrongdoings. Keep going in verse 13. He says, as you're putting on compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience, he continues on this and says, bearing with one another and forgiving one another if anyone has a grievance against another. And listen to this caveat. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you are also to forgive. There are two things happening in this verse. The first is Paul is telling us we must be bearing with people. And the second thing is he says, and forgiving. Now I love where he starts here, is he says bearing with. And bearing with is in the Bible because here's what Paul is saying. Paul is assuming that the church would be annoying. Now here's what I mean by that, because maybe that feels like a little wrong to say the church is annoying. Well, let's do our theology. The church is not a building. A building cannot be annoying except for when ACs go out. That's pretty annoying, right? A church is not a property. Instead, the church is the people. And let me tell you, the people that make up a church, you and I especially, guys, we can be pretty annoying. And people can be hard to deal with. People can annoy each other. Only one guy was brave enough to say amen in that. But what Paul is describing here is not an easy fellowship. He is not describing something where we're all holding hands and singing kumbaya. He's describing a community that is real but is durable, and every community is going to have friction in it. And if it is not, honestly, that community is failing because they are lying to each other. But this is a community he's describing as a working community. But then he goes a little further and he describes what this bearing with one another looks like. He says this, if anyone has a grievance against another. Now, listen, Paul doesn't say if anyone imagines a grievance. He's not just saying like, if I think someone hurt me. He's saying it's real. He says someone actually did something to wrong you, to hurt you. Somebody really did it. And then the word he uses here is forgiveness should come into this. The word forgiveness that he uses is charizome, which is built out of the word charis, which means grace. And when he says forgive someone, what he's literally saying is you need to grace someone. You need to give them something they do not deserve because they have hurt you. But then he gives us a standard of how we are to forgive people. And this is the standard that is tough. The standard that is not easy is he says we are to forgive just as the Lord has forgiven you. About a month ago, we did the math on this as we went through a parable. And the parable, as we saw, of the wicked servant, of how much God has forgiven us compared to how much we forgive others, is Jesus used an unbearable number. It was $12 billion in today's terms. Literally more money that was in circulation at that time in Rome. And he uses this astronomical number that it would take 200,000 lifetimes to pay off your debt to God. And then he does a comparison. He's like, the way people wrong you, he said the ratio is 800,000 to 1. Meaning you will never forgive someone as much as God has forgiven you. And why this is so important is the forgiveness you hand out is measured against the forgiveness you have received. And you receive a number that you can never pay back in 200,000 lifetimes. And we've seen this over and over and over again throughout history. In October 2nd, 2006, there was this one-room Amish schoolhouse in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania. And one tragic day, there was a local milk truck driver, a man who was carrying years of anger at God over the death of his baby daughter. He walked in one morning and he shot 10 girls in that little school. 5 of them died, and then he proceeded to take his own life. That same evening, the same day that this happened, Amish neighbors, including the grandfather of one of the girls, walked up to the driveway of the shooter's families, not with lawyers, not with cameras, not with police officers. They came to comfort his wife, a 28-year-old mother of 3 little kids, and to tell the family that they did not hold this against them. As the story continues, it says days later, a group of them stood at the shooter's funeral and went over, throughout the course of this, over $4 million in donations flooded into that small community town to help the families with their loss. The Amish families set aside a portion of it for the shooter's children that he left behind. When the world asked how any of this was possible, when people were angry, they would even go do this. Their answer was essentially this, is they said the forgiveness is not a feeling you find in the moment. It's a way of life you learn in a community. And I love this. It says so that you never become, in their words, a hostage to hostility. Now hear me clearly, because I think this matters, is their forgiveness did not shrink the tragedy of what happened in that situation. Horrible evil was done. Horrible hurt was wrought out. There were consequences for those actions. And some of you today come in here and you're carrying stuff. You're carrying grievances against one another that are valid. You're carrying hurts of people that have done things to you, and you want to just hold on to it. And they are not just small little things, they are big in your world. And the question is, and so do we just pretend it didn't happen? Do we just let it go like it was nothing? No. Forgiveness is not pretending that the hurt isn't real. But forgiveness is refusing to let the hurt write the ending of our story. And as Paul is engaging with this family, he's like, guys, you're going to come to a church community and people will make you mad. If they're not making you mad, it's because you don't know enough of them. He's like, life is going to be tough. And here's really how we live this out, is people aren't going to make you that mad on a Sunday unless they sit next to you and sing super loud. And maybe then it's this, and then you just need to be more joyful and love Jesus a little more, all right? It's like, but it's hard for someone to make you mad on a Sunday morning in a row. But here's the thing, is we've been encouraging, and we'll encourage you more, is people will make you mad in circles, as you get in Bible groups, as you get in serve groups, as you get in community with people, as you learn more about people, they will offend you and you will offend them, and everything in between. And Paul here calls us to, how do we keep forgiving and loving beyond this, knowing that people are broken just like you are broken, but we have a God who has forgiven us so much so that we can forgive others. You see, we put on radical values. We forgive radical wrongdoings against us, but then it continues and it builds on this. We also must love radical people. As Paul keeps going, he comes to kind of this high point of this text, and it says, above all, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. Paul here says, above all, the last layer of clothes to put on. Now, as I was thinking about this, I'm like, this kind of breaks down in Phoenix, Arizona, because we don't put on layers of clothes, all right? We're not one of those places that you have to shed layers as you go. It's just either hot or not hot, not cold, just not hot, right? But here, if you're in a place where you have to wear layers, the last layer you put on is this love. It is the coat that goes on over everything else. The wardrobe is not finished without it. And look at what Paul calls it. He calls it the bond of unity. That word, it's a body word. It is the word for a ligament. It is the same word Paul uses one chapter earlier for what holds a body together. You ask any athlete, and it's funny, as I already had this prepared in here, and then I watched an episode of the new Ted Lasso, and they talked about how ligaments are so small to put together big muscles. I'm speaking theoretically, not my muscles, because they're a lot smaller than some muscles that ligaments hold together. But ligaments are so tiny, so small, and somehow hold our body together. And one little tear in a ligament ruins everything. You tear a ligament, and all of a sudden those muscles, that body part is useless. And here, he says, and he shows us that love is the ligament that holds it together. It is what holds parts together that otherwise would come undone and come apart. And this is exactly why love has to be radical for us. Because you look around this room, and here's what I love about church, is throughout your life is you pick friends. But when you come to a church family, you don't always know all the people you're picking in a church family. Like, you picked the church, and the people are all there with it. And sometimes you're like, oh, all these people are part of my church? Oh. And it's this beautiful conglomeration of people from all different walks of life. But when we come together, united by one ligament of love and the love of Jesus Christ, all of a sudden this thing works. Somehow, a retired factory worker from the Midwest and a 20-year-old who has AI code them their entire job overnight can come together. Somehow, a widow who has been here since before this building was built, before we had 6 locations across Arizona, all of a sudden, they can lock arms with a family that just unpacked boxes in a new build 3 weeks ago. Somehow a 30-year-old mom running on 4 hours of sleep and a 75-year-old who wishes anything to have a little bit more noise in the house can make this special bond. And church, this is what I love about the big church, and honestly, this is what I love about Cross Church in general, is this multi-generational people from different walks of life with different interests and different hobbies. We have ropers and cowboys who want me to go like rope a bull or something and know that I would die doing that, and we have nothing in common except for the love of Christ that brings us together. And this is the beauty of the church, of how all of this thing works. And I love that Paul, as he continues to build this, he shows how, man, we need to put on these radical values. how we need to forgive and we need to put on this forgiveness for those who have hurt us in big ways. But then we also need to, this last thing we see is we need to thank our radical God. Keep going in verse 15 as it continues. And he says this, and let the peace of Christ, to which you are also called in one body, rule your hearts and be thankful. Look at the verb he uses there. This verb of rule. The Greek word here is barabo, and this is the only place it appears in the New Testament. It is not a king word. It literally means to umpire. It's the official at the game who makes the call in a close play that says balls or strikes. We have humans that do that in baseball right now. Pretty soon it's all going to be robots, and baseball will be better for it, all right? Because these umpires are terrible. But they're there, and they're calling balls and strikes. And he says, in letting this rule in our hearts, it's calling what is right and what is wrong. And Paul chose this on purpose because in any real community, there will be close plays. You will hear things and be like, was that comment rude or was I oversensitive about that? Like, no, they were rude, right? That was rude. That was totally rude. And then they're like, oh, do I say something or do I just let it go? Is this something to make a hill out of or is this something to just let pass? And those things will go on in your head. You will have those things you got to look for and think about. But here is when we let God rule in our hearts. All of a sudden, Paul says on the close plays, let the peace of Christ make the call. Not your pride. Oh, that gets me in trouble all the time. Not your preferences, which are differing depending on who you are. Not your lawyer, because we know they just want to sue everyone, right? Is his peace gets the final word in the room. And here's the thing, a community does not fall apart over the big plays. It falls apart over 100 close calls that nobody ever let the umpire call in the first place. I told you I like to play pickleball, and one of the things I'm trying to do and be better at, and I think I've really improved, is I only call whether it's in or out when I know for sure. And I'm pretty fair about that. Don't laugh, Josh. I'm right, you're wrong 90% of the time. Cisco knows what I'm talking about. But I try to here's what I do, is I only call it if I'm sure, and if I had to call it right away. If you wait 3 seconds or even 2 seconds to call it, it's too late. There was doubt in your head and you called it and now you feel like you cheated. So it's it has to be clear, this was wrong and I'm calling them on it, not because I just want to win the game, but because I'm right and I want to ensure the integrity of the game. Yeah. Thought you guys would be on my side on this one. But Paul says, in our life, let the peace of Christ be the one making the calls. But then he builds on it, and catch this phrase. He says, we are called in one body. He says, you were not called to Jesus and then offered a church like an extended warranty that came with it. The body is in the call to coming to him. Is belonging to a church family, belonging to a people group is not something we add on to our relationship with Christ. It is part of the whole package of coming to Jesus and following him. And this is exactly why we build our church around this. This is exactly why next week we have things like Pizza with a Pastor, where we get to share the heart of our church and we get to ask you to come be a part of it. This is exactly why we do Bible groups, where we say, hey, you get to do life in community with one another, because we can't take Jesus and reject his people. His people come with the whole Jesus thing. And then the last 3 words he uses of this passage is he says, and be thankful. If we look at this verse and this passage continuing into verses 16 and 17 that we looked at last week, in verse 15, he uses the word thankful. In verse 16, he uses the word gratitude. And in verse 17, he uses the word giving thanks. 3 times in 3 verses where it says we must be thankful to God. But the question is, be thankful to what kind of God? We'll look back up through this passage because we've already seen the answers to this 4 different times. And he shows it in here. In verse 12, it says, we have a God that we serve, that he chose us, that he loves us, that he made himself known to us through his word so that we could see him and we could choose to follow him, is he revealed himself because of his love. In verse 13, it says he forgave us. Despite how much we have messed up, he has forgiven us over and over again. In verse 14, it says he loved you, that he doesn't hold things against you. He just keeps loving and pursuing you. And in verse 15, as he called you, he said, hey, come be a part of this family, a part of this community that will change everything about your life. And I love that every command in this passage, that when we talk about putting on, when we talk about forgiving, when we talk about loving, when we talk about thanking, all of this is already an echo of something that God already did first for us. This is a radical God that we serve. You see, all this points to this central truth that we see over the text this morning, is that if we want to have a Christ-centered community, if we want to be a part of a church family that makes a lot of Jesus and doesn't make a lot out of the garbage of our world and of the petty things that we'll fight over, that we will get annoyed over, if we want a Christ-centered community that says, I'm going to love and forgive and pursue people no matter how annoying they are, because I know I'm annoying too, and God loves me despite my annoyance, that none of this will happen if we don't apply this text. And here's how we apply it, is that a rooted, Christ-centered community only happens when you know God and people know you. This is a hard thing to put into practice. First, you need to know God. You need to know the God of the universe, who I love the imagery of this passage, that it says that we are to put on this character, put on these clothes that make us different. And here's what's so amazing is you cannot put on kindness and gentleness and forgiveness on your own, because you are a sinner and you fall short of doing those things all the time. And if you want proof of that, just ask your spouse or ask your kids and they will tell you. But we serve a God who did put on humanity. He put on all of those character traits and he walked it to the cross to die in our place, to raise again. So when we put on those things, we don't put on our own clothes of us trying harder. Instead, we put on the robe of Christ that covers our sin and lets us live in light of him. That is the God we know. That is the God we serve. That is the God we love. And honestly, a lot of us, we're all on board with that part. So many of us, we know that God. And maybe you don't know him yet, but you're like, man, this Jesus dude, he sounds awesome. I love the fact that he wipes my slate clean, that he forgives me. He just calls me to give up my sin. I can do that to pursue him. I'm all in this Jesus. I want to know him. But others knowing me, that's the hard part. It's the hard part when you say, I don't know if I want to be vulnerable. I don't know if I want people speaking into my life. I don't know if I want, when the storm hits and my tree starts to get uprooted, I don't know if I want people to see how truly shallow I am, how truly rotted I am, how truly much I am struggling. But here's the deal, church, we're missing it, is the purpose is not that our roots go so deep that we are so close to Jesus and we are better than everyone else. It's that they go out and we start linking our roots with other trees that aren't deep either, but they're deep enough to get to the ground of Christ and to lock arms with one another. So when that wind blows, it doesn't blow one tree, but it blows a forest. And here's how we can practically do that today. How do you be a part of the forest and not just a lone tree standing out on Bell Road getting blown over by the monsoon? Well, the answer is not to bring redwood trees to California, I'll tell you that. But the answer is to spiritually put your roots in a place where there are trees already planted. And let me tell you, at the corner of 175th and Bell, there are spiritual roots here. There are men and women who know Jesus, who are already connected to other roots around them, and they are pleading with you and asking, hey, come plant by me. Come sit under my shade. Come get some water here. And see that when life gets hard, you have some people you can lean on and that you can love with, that they will help you withstand life's trials so that you can know something greater and that your life doesn't have to fall apart when things are tough. Let me give you 2 practical steps of how you can start that journey. One is next week, if you're new here, if you haven't said, this is my church, if you haven't put your roots in the ground yet, come join us for Pizza with a Pastor. This is all we do, is we share who we are as a church, and we give you very practical steps on how you can get involved. What does it look like to know other people? Not just show up for an hour on Sunday morning and leave, but how can you know a community that can grow around you and that you can know God and you can know other people? And maybe you've done that. Maybe you've been through that. What your next step is you need to be in a Bible group, or if you're in a Bible group, you need to see someone who's not, and you need to get them in one so they can experience this community. They can experience the love that Christ has for them, and so we don't have to go through this life alone. Man, I'm super excited as we start back our groups up in September 13th, as football will be depressing, and I'm going to put that to the side. But the highlight of my week every Tuesday will be that we get to open our home and we get to have a bunch of young adults who are single, not married yet, 18 to 30, are full of joy and promise and have no idea how hard life is going to be. And we just get to love on them. We get to show them what a family looks like. We get to learn from them, and they teach me cool slang all the time. It's great. But we just get to do life together. And my encouragement for you is don't leave this place without taking your next step. Sign up for Pizza with the Pastor right wherever you are. You can scan the QR code. You can sign up right there, or right after the service, go to our table for our Bible groups. Find one, sign up online. Don't leave this place today without making sure you know the God of the universe and that you have people in your life that know you, that will hold you accountable, that will love you, that will annoy you, but that you will grow closer to each other and closer to God as a result. Church, let's be rooted in community this week. Let's be rooted in community over this next month and watch how no matter what storm life gives us, how we can stand firm in what He is doing.